Can all join palms? And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Keep the palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thanks for being here. It's just something that's on my mind that keeps coming up is, how many of you here, if any of you have been to Metaphorus Monastery? Escondido, anybody? No? Okay, well, great. Don't be shy, come on forward, there's plenty of seats. So there's a monastery in Escondido, just north, Valley Center, and it's a Thai forest tradition monastery. The abbot there, his name is Thanissaro Bhikkhu or Ajahn Jeff, a wonderful monk who is one of the three really main translators of what's called the Pali Canon, which is the original teachings of the Buddha that were initially memorized and then transcribed in the early Pali days, and then have remained, like I said, as we know them to be, as the Pali Canon. And so Thanissaro Bhikkhu, Ajahn Jeff, along with two others, are mostly credited with translating them from Pali into English. And aside from all that, I'm trying to not go on too many tangents there, because the reason I bring it up is one of the most beautiful things about this monastery is you look at the Buddha's life and how he lived 2,500 years ago. And often people might think that, you know, it was a long time ago in a faraway land and they were monks and then there were nuns and, you know, it's going to be completely different from how things are today. And it's this common, I don't want to call it excuse, but maybe like justification people often use. We're like, oh, the Buddha lived at that time and it was that way. And it's so much harder today. Do we have any royalty in the room? Like prince, princess, any queens or kings that I'm not in your own head, but any queens or kings that I'm not aware of, you know, not your social media title or anything like that? No, I just want to make sure. So the dude was a prince, okay? I'm pretty sure him leaving that life and becoming a homeless wandering beggar as a monk was way more difficult than anything we've tried to do. So you can take that kind of justification and rationalization and throw it out the window, but also not why I bring it up, right? I bring it up to say that, you know, 45 minutes to an hour north of here, depending upon what time you go and all that, is a beautiful monastery sitting in the avocado groves where they live literally the life of the Buddha. And the Vinaya, which is the original code of conduct, and the really for the moral, ethical discipline and training and the precepts and all of that were written, that's all what they follow. They've not deviated from it at all. One thing to point out, and again, getting to why I bring this up, is they do morning alms rounds. And just like the Buddha did, they would go out in the morning once, begging for food. Whatever they were given, they split up, they ate, and that was their only meal of the day. and that was all, and that's how they lived. And the most beautiful thing about that space, I think, is to be able to participate in what's called the morning alms rounds. And it's such a moving experience. The reason it's on my mind is our college group just had a retreat there. By retreat, they go up for about 4 hours, 6 hours. They help. They, do whatever's necessary. They do some meditation, some chanting, some Dharma talks, but they get to participate in the morning alms round. All you have to do to participate in the morning alms round is show up by about 8 o'clock in the morning. The fact that we got 25 college kids there on a Saturday morning at 8 a.m. is a miracle in its own right, but also not why I bring this up. But if you've never seen Buddhist monks take alms, it's so moving. It's really beautiful, and it's an opportunity to actually see what it's like to, you can bring food, of course. There's plenty of food there, but the food is all brought by the people, the lay people from all over, San Diego, LA, things like that come down and take care of the monastery and help the monks. But the food is all there, and if you show up for the first time, which you all would, you'll be like everybody else who's shown up for the first time, completely lost, completely confused, with this glossy look over your face, like, what do I do now? And somebody there will see that, and they will help you. So don't worry about that, okay? And they'll give you a bowl of food, a small bowl. The bowl they give you is not for you to eat. One year, a couple of college kids standing in line started eating the food that they were giving, not realizing that was to offer to the monks. But they'll give you this food, and then you get to offer it to them. And it's such a really, I think, potentially life-changing experience, because you get to put food in somebody's bowl, recognizing that if you're not there and nobody is there, they don't eat. And it's a really cool experience to see that tradition carried out today. So put it on your list of things to do. If you're interested, go to the website. I think it's Metaphor. Just Google Metaphorist. They are very strict with rules and like that. Shorts, you can't wear shorts when you're there. You want to have very concealing clothing. So they are very careful with their guidelines and code of conduct and things like that. They ask you to respect. But it's a great experience. And so the college kids were writing a couple blog posts, and one of them shared something about how moving it was for them to actually participate in the passing out of alms to Buddhist monks. So 45 minutes to an hour north of here, it's all sitting there. And Ajahn Jeff Thanissaro Bhikkhu is also, he's one of the most incredible Buddhist teachers in the modern day. And he's sitting here, right next to us. Often people say, like, I'm looking for a Buddhist teacher. And I'll say, well, Thanissaro Bhikkhu is 45 minutes to an hour north of here. You know what they tell me? I read your lips. It's a skill I developed very early on. I don't know why or how. It's too far. And then I say, then you're not ready for a Buddhist teacher. You just want somebody to listen to you. Both important, right? But check out Metaphorist if you get a chance. A really special place. And if nothing else, the website has incredible teachings as well. A lot of Dharma talks and things like that you can check out. So, all right. Good evening, everybody, as well. Joining us virtually. Thank you for being here. So we'll start with the meditation practice. There's a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. Okay, you're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long, not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. You don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. Okay, you'll hear sounds. Sounds inside the room, sounds outside the room. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. However you're seated. If you're on a cushion, often slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. Same thing if you're in the chairs or a bench, just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders, hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important with this practice, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, release that thought Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice, just sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe, knowing with each breath there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit, or the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around you, or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. All we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It is direct perception into the present moment. And recognizing that that present moment is often incredibly difficult, challenging. And learning to be with life as it is what the practice is about. We spend so much time wanting to change everything around us, fix everything around us, everyone around us. Wishing they would do this, wishing they would do that, hoping someday they do this, hoping someday they do that. So much time focused on what others are doing. And this practice is focusing on what we think and what we say and what we do. And that's why it's so much fun. Because we get to work on our own thoughts and our own words and our own actions, which gives us control of our own lives. And that can be really scary. Sometimes it's a lot easier to just be thrown around and carried around and moved around, I mean that metaphorically, by everything around us. But when we begin to take some sense of responsibility, ownership, commitment, dedication to our own lives and our own thoughts and our own words and our actions, and our life can begin to change. But that's kind of scary because we can often settle into a very uncomfortable place in our lives. And yet people and places and things around us will just convince us, trick us, confuse us to thinking that that's okay. And so we remain incredibly uncomfortable. And there's a fine balance here, of course. It doesn't mean you run every time things get difficult. Right? The practice of patience and diligence, which you've all learned so well through Buddhist teachings. And I'm so proud of you for being a room filled of just patient and diligent people. Right? Yay. Did you all feel the pat on the back and the big hug there? So the patience and diligence is important because it'll help us with challenges and difficulties. But sometimes those challenges and difficulties aren't going away. And they're going to be there day after day, year after year. And so we have to make choices to sometimes liberate ourselves from very painful situations, toxic, unhealthy dynamics. And that is scary. A lot of what one of my favorite Buddhist teachers is the late Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who's a pretty crazy dude. I don't necessarily support the way he personally lived his life, but I am a huge fan of his teachings. He was at a very young age. The Dalai Lama kind of, tapped him as the future of Buddhism, and a very high-ranking, wise Lama to be, things like that, kind of making that up. I don't know exactly what the Dalai Lama said from him, or said about him. Don't paraphrase me on that, but the Dalai Lama pretty much said he was a good dude. And later on in his life, in maybe his 40s-ish, he renounced, meaning no longer was a Tibetan Lama, and ended up in Colorado in the 60s and built Shambhala and devoted his life at that stage to sharing Buddhist teachings and Dharma into Colorado in the 60s. So imagine what that was like. Not quite like San Francisco in the 60s, but probably not too far behind either. And as a lay person, he pretty much became one of them. And that meant he did everything they did. And I'll let you fill in the blanks there. We have children in the room here today, so I'll leave out all the gory details. But it's all there. And his teachings are incredible. In fact, there's a wonderful documentary called Crazy Wisdom, and about his life. And many people are familiar with Pema Chodron. Once people get to know Chogyam Trungpa and they see like what he did and how he lived his life, it gets kind of a bad rap. But everybody loves Pema Chodron. Pema Chodron was a student of his, and she thought he was brilliant. But I just always have to preface him when I talk about him, because if I mention his name and I say his teachings, and then you go home and you start Googling him, you're like, what? Jeff was telling us to look into this guy? His teachings are incredible. And so he talked a lot about fearlessness, which is what led me down the mind ramble on Chogyam Trungpa, and fearlessness and groundlessness. And we find ourselves stuck very often in our lives. And because of that, we just can't live with any sort of liberation or happiness or freedom whatsoever. And we're stuck in our own minds. And so figuring out how to break through all of that, break through the constructs that everything has been built for us, the ideas, the labels, the boxes that society and family and friends and everybody thinks we're supposed to fit into. This whole practice is to recognize there is no box to fit into. You just completely shatter all of that. Nothing to fit into. You're just you as you are, and allowing life to happen around you. And then you can begin to feel alive again. And I've been in this world enough and leading this stuff long enough to know that a lot of people showing up here just don't feel alive. Just kind of going through the motion, clocking in, clocking out, whether it's a job or whatever it might be. It's just a metaphor. But you should feel alive because you are. And one day you won't be, in case you haven't figured that out yet. You know, I should have had him cover the ears. Sorry. But yeah, so with that, I'll pause. For me, I'd really rather just respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and use the rest of the time this evening to respond to your thoughts and your questions. Yeah.
You just mentioned fearlessness and groundlessness.
Yeah.
What do you mean by groundlessness?
Yeah, so there's a metaphor that he gives that he says Buddhist teachings is like you're on a really tall building. And the bad news is you've jumped. The good news is there's no ground to fall onto. So you just keep going. But for me, what that metaphor of the ground is it's every label, every box, as kind of I was speaking about, that we have put into our own lives. No matter how heavily conditioned it was by our upbringing, our family, our friends, our society, our culture, whatever it is, we've still bought into that thinking. And that tells us what we should wear, what we should eat, where we should work, who we should fall in love with, what we should spend our day doing. It tells us all of that stuff. That ground is all of those boxes. And so if you shatter all of that, you're not trying to fit into anything anymore. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And so to me, applying the fearlessness and groundlessness are two different things, because it requires a level of fearlessness to do that, to actually reject what mainstream culture and mainstream thought has established for us. And that's where the Buddhist teachings gets that kind of expression of the two, but in a completely different way. I was about to say, who would be crazy enough to be a prince and walk away from that, right? But that's completely against the stream. So think about in our own lives, what you have walked into, stepped into, engaged in, and you are just afraid to venture away from it. And that could be a million things, right? From small things to large things. And can you be fearlessness enough to say, this is what I'm going to do. This is who I'm going to be. This is who I am. Or will we continue to live in fear and never take that step? And show up here week after week, year after year, listening to the same stuff. You know? God, I hope someday nobody shows up here anymore. You know? I mean, I love you all and everything. Don't take that the wrong way. But, you know. So, hope that helps. Yeah. You've heard my metaphor for that little child's game where you put the shapes inside the thing. You heard me talk about that? You know, I know there's a name for it. I don't know what it is, but there's a little child game that, like, the thing is actually, could be a box. I've seen it in different shapes, but let's just say it's a box. And it has like a circle and a square and a star, and then it has the circle and the square and the star. And it tells you, you know, you have to put the circle and the circle and the square and the square and the star and the star. And then you get it all right, and everyone's like, yay, you did everything exactly how we wanted you to do it. And if the child actually got like the circle in the star one, even though it's not supposed to go in there, they're like, no, that's wrong. Well, is the objective to do it how you wanted me to do it, or is the objective to do it, is the objective just to get it in the box? But our entire life is something telling us each shape must go an exact way. And that has ruined all of us. Yeah. So we're all screwed from the start, folks. It's not your fault. Don't feel so bad. You know? Yeah. Other questions? Yeah. Yeah, Jake. It is Jake, right?
It is,
Yeah.
So last week we talked about kind of following your own fate or destiny and whatnot. And then so now you're talking about trying to break through these boxes and whatnot and be yourself. But what if being yourself can lead you down some pretty poor choices that
Yeah. Yeah, then you're in trouble. So the question is, again, to repeat, for those virtually, and I didn't say I'm sorry to those virtually, again, welcome. There's a chat box there on the screen, as you can see, so feel free to type in any thoughts or questions, and I'll do my best to address them as well. So the question is, I talked last week about, kind of, what did I talk about last week? I forgot already. Being yourself, or however you said it. And this week about breaking free. But your question is, what if being yourself leads you to making lots of bad choices? Then what, right? Then you end up sitting right here leading this stuff twice a week for 12 years. That's what happens when you make lots of bad choices. Okay, so you're good. Right? Here's the thing. It's a journey. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of little steps we take on our, whatever you want to call it, on our spiritual journey, on our journey to suffer less, on our journey to get out of our misery, on our journey to be less angry, stressed, depressed, anxious, miserable our whole lives, or whatever you want to call that, there's a lot of steps that you take. The first step is showing up. Like you said, and like we talked after last week, it'd been a few years since you'd been here and you were going down a path and that path wasn't your path, and here you are again. So the first step is you show up. And so you're on that, you never really fell off that journey. You just kind of had to go through however many terrible choices you made over the last couple of years, and I won't make you count them all up, right? Because my guess is it might have been a couple, right? However terrible those choices were that you made, you're still here. You probably went through a lot of pain and suffering. You potentially caused a lot of pain and suffering, right? That's what we do when we make bad choices. We hurt ourselves and we hurt others. We're actually hurting initially ourselves. That's why we make bad choices, because we don't have the love and compassion and care and wisdom for ourselves enough to actually make wise choices. Right? All these things Buddha talks about, loving kindness, compassion, joy, we don't have that in our own life. So we make poor choices. We feel miserable, we make poor choices, we hurt other people. It's a vicious cycle we get into. We do that for a few years or 25 years, and then we realize, oh, I should do things differently. Then we show up, and then you just keep going. And you begin to recognize the fact that you can sit here and ask that question means you want to change. And then it requires work. I wish it was like, read page 17 in this book and you're healed, but I could just like touch your forehead and you are cured. No, man, now the real work starts. The making poor choices and doing dumb things, I'm talking about myself, not you, that's the easy part. Then the diligence, that's to me the great Bodhisattva Samantabhadra, which represents great diligence. It's the effort that we now must put in to stop making those choices and recognizing that being yourself, kind of coming back to your question, I'm going to completely contradict everything I just said. There is no inherent self, as the Buddha teaches, non-self. So you are completely different. Now, the way you asked that question is really a perfect example, because you said, well, what if I'm paraphrasing here, but what if me being myself is not a smart idea? That's not you. No more than you making wise choices is you. You are just a human with this physical body and a consciousness. And at some times in your life, you make wise choices. And at some times in your life, you make unwise choices, right? So who are you? Are you the wise choice, Jake? Are you the foolish choice, Jake? You're all of them. So the next step is really to stop thinking like, I need to be me. Forget about being me and make wise choices. Stop trying to identify yourself as anyone, right? And again, for my personal practice, that's something I had to remove the label of doing myself and calling myself tons of terrible names and things for doing terrible things. And I had to say, okay, I can't change past, but what can I do going forward? You just have to start, again, thinking good thoughts, speaking good words, doing good deeds, small little practices. And that's the 6 tusks of the paramitas on the Bodhisattva Samatapadu, the 6 tusks: generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. How can you bring those 6 practices into your life? Slowly. And if you do that every day, a little bit more than you are right now, and make a few less foolish choices than you are now, if you build that, I mean, I'm saying one day at a time, but let's just, like in the movies, snap, and here we are 2 years later. And then you're going to say, oh, for the last 2 years, I've been this Jake. You're just a person making choices. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And it's similar to a question. I don't remember if it was the last Tuesday or if it was Saturday, but somebody down here asked a question and they said, well, at some point in time, don't you have to just kind of trust yourself? And I was like, no. For many of us, that's the worst thing you want to do, because that self that we're trusting, we've identified ourselves as a certain person. And if that self that we're trusting is that self that is not doing wise, healthy things, and you don't want that self playing out in your life, because that'll cause harm. So, yeah. And again, for those who are brand new to Buddhism, the whole non-self thing, just to sum up like the deepest Buddhist teachings in about 10 seconds, it doesn't mean that you don't exist. It doesn't mean you're not here. It doesn't mean you're not real. It just means that you are different from how you perceive yourself to be. You label yourself a certain way. You judge yourself a certain way. So do others. And none of those labels or judgments define who you are. They're just things you tell yourself or others tell yourself about you. We are just a series of karma, law of cause and effect. We're a series of choices. And that creates our life. Other thoughts, questions? Yes. Yeah.
I've got a doozy for you.
All right.
So this has been on my mind for a while. So I'm teaching American literature, and we just finished the Founding Fathers. And I'm trying to teach these 11th graders. So I'm trying to teach them not to cancel these people because of their transgressions, the enslavement of people, the sexual power dynamic, possible rape, these types of things. And look at the ideas that they generated, and then engage with the ideas. And it's very difficult for them to do. But then you bring up the bright and shiny llama, the rising star, who rejected the monastic vows. I've seen some of the documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
And then his follower says, no, he was a really cool dude. You need to listen to what he had to say. And you mentioned that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like for you to just talk about, I'm not asking you how we're going to reconcile all this, because this is like a huge thing in our culture right now. What are your thoughts on it?
Many.
Okay.
Right at 7:59 p.m. I have about 47 years of thoughts. 1, not possible rape, definite rape. 2, you are a white male, and you're going to have an impossible time opening up your mouth on any of those topics. I mean, I support you in giving it an old, college try. But with all the privileges that come along as being a white male, you're going to be a tough one there, right? That's just the reality, okay? So I would walk into those situations recognizing that, the things that you bring up have existed for hundreds to thousands of years and still exist today. We're just able to see it finally in a light that was never possible before. And so, thankfully, that we can see it because it's in our face and it cannot be ignored. so much oppression, racism, sexual abuse. Within Buddhism as well, it exists. Patriarchy. The great masters and Buddhist teachers and using their power over predominantly male teachers, using their power over women. It's all there. All of it. So Buddhism is not free from that. I think it's a reach to try to tie founding fathers to, I think where you're going with this, my sense from knowing you for the last few years is, I understand where you're going with this. Is like, okay, well, if you're able to draw insight from this Tibetan Buddhist Lama who disrobed and did lots of bad stuff, how can we also gain insight from just slave-owning, racist, lots of words I'm not going to say right now, right? That's where I think you're trying to go, is how can we learn from those people? That's heavy. People don't want to learn from those people. And I don't blame them. You know, I really don't. The one thing I can say about Chogyam Trungpa, and what's interesting is his world in the order as the Tibetan Lama did all of that stuff first, and then went the other direction, continued to teach tremendous wisdom in words, and created potential harm in action. You look at throughout history, you have Milarepa, who was, really just terrible person, and then became this like great Buddhist saint. But I think it's a reach to try to there's something there. But what I've learned through this practice is to recognize my privilege, and to recognize, I mean, it's tough when you're a teacher because you're probably not just going to, well, maybe you can. Let me just say this. What I've recognized, especially in these last, say, 5 to 10 years, is one of the most important things I can do is listen with regards to these topics that you mentioned. Is to just listen, first off. And then when I speak, be very clear on who I'm speaking to and how I'm saying it. Right? Because there's a lot of things that, as I mentioned, I got every privilege in the book. White, male, heterosexual, able-bodied, Jewish, we're the chosen ones, right? I mean, I got every privilege there is. That's a lot of power, and you have to be careful with that. In trying to teach to high school kids, high school, right? Yeah, high school kids, that's tough because they're angry, and they should be. And high school kids don't all want to listen to, not older white men talk about the founding fathers. Not happening. Bring in guest speakers that aren't you, don't look like you, don't have your experiences, don't have your privilege. Bring in others. Let them introduce the founding fathers. See how that goes. Be fearless. Administration says no, why not? I want to bring in a guest speaker. This is who's going to teach us today. So, yeah, tough stuff.
That was good, thank you.
Sure. Never answers, as always, with this stuff. There's no quick solution with any of this stuff, but, you're hundreds to thousands of years of oppression. And like I said, I'm just glad that, one of the many beautiful things of technology, I think there's a lot of unfortunate negative stuff that comes out of it, but I think one of the beautiful things about technology is that it shines a light on so many things that we now need to see. These things have always been there. And for me, the Buddhist practice is to how do we engage with all of these situations with kindness and compassion and understanding. But again, I often default back to, because I know my role in it, and I'm not quiet, but I find I've done my best to figure out when to listen, when to speak, and who to speak to, and how to speak to them. And when to not talk back, when to not, it's okay sometimes to not voice your opinion. Newsflash, I'll close with this thought. I know this will shock you all, but once in a while, when you have an opinion about something, no matter how right you think you are, or no matter how much you must get this opinion across, it's okay to say, you know what? I'm just going to stay quiet. So, and then you also got to know when to speak up. So, perfect balance, which I'm having all the faith in the world each one of you knows how to find. So, all right. So we'll close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to more than 6 million lives that were lost during this pandemic and continue to suffer, their family and friends who suffer today. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. Thank you, Carly. So just a couple quick announcements before you all head out.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carly. I'm tonight's host, and the one who forgot to open the windows. We opened the Turtle Club Temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. We're simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice with others. Just about every night, we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, or anything else for that matter. A family sangha for parents, kids, toddlers, teens, which currently meets once a month. And we also offer a half-day silent retreat the first Saturday of the month with an RSVP required. Everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack, all those little one-page informational flyers. We also have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it, then bring it back whenever you're done. I was going to ask people to straighten their cushions, but you guys are all in chairs, so that's all I got for you.
Thanks, Carly. And this side windows, you can actually just leave those open for right now. Thank you. I just saw, it's too late tonight to answer my question. Thank you, Jeff, for tonight's teaching. Yeah, so if you have any questions virtually, just feel free to maybe next time throw them in here and I'll be happy to address them. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Hey, Chef.
Good to see you again. Thank you. Don't be so hard on yourself. Yes, ma'am.
The book that I saw downstairs last weekend, can we also borrow it then?
Say again?
All the books you have downstairs,
Yes.
are they your private books or can I also borrow? I just saw one book that I wanted.
You're talking about on the shelf down there?
No, downstairs in the little room we were, there's a book that I saw.
Where is it? What book?
It's called Body. No. Body.
Is it on the lower shelf?
Yeah.
Yeah, just take it. It's fine.
Can I go downstairs? Really?
Yeah, go grab it. You're welcome. Thank you. Hello.